10 golden era classics that defined a generation hip-hop legends archives. Before streaming killed the mixtape era, before the algorithm decided what you heard, these 10 songs sat in your Walkman on repeat. They shaped how an entire generation of MCs would approach their craft. And honestly, most of them still hit harder than 90% of what's out there today. This is the archival deep dive that separates the real heads from the casual listeners. Number 1 starts with a beat that still makes the hair on your neck stand up. In 1991, if you were walking through any major city in America, New York, Houston, Los Angeles, it didn't matter. You heard one song more than any other. It wasn't about how many times it hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was about the streets. It was about whether that track had the power to make you stop what you were doing and actually listen. See, the golden era wasn't built on algorithmic playlists or streaming numbers. It was built on word of mouth, on bootleg cassettes passed hand to hand, on DJ Premier scratching those same breaks at block parties. These 10 songs represent that era at its absolute peak, when hip-hop was still dangerous, still revolutionary, and still completely unmeasured by the industry. We're talking about the records that made you want to grab a pen and write rhymes, the beats that made you move even when you didn't want to move. Some became mainstream hits, others stayed closer to the underground but earned legendary status anyway. By the end of this, you're gonna remember exactly where you were when you first heard these tracks and why they mattered so much more than anything before or since. Number 10, Give It Up, Turn It Loose by the Commodores. Now this isn't a hip-hop track, not originally. This is 1974 soul music, smooth as whiskey, produced and written by James Brown's former band, the Commodores. But here's where the golden era genius comes in. In 1988, when Gang Starr used this sample on their track, Words I Manifest, suddenly it wasn't just a soul song anymore. It became foundational hip-hop. Producers like DJ Premier would take those horn stabs, those drum hits, and layer them under some of the rawest rhymes ever written. The Commodore's original was funk, pure and simple. It had soul, it had sophistication, it had everything that would make a beat flip from soul to something completely new. What made the Commodore's original so crucial is that it embodied an era when production was about live instrumentation, about horn sections, about musicality. When hip-hop producers sampled it, they weren't sampling lazily. They were paying respect to a generation of musicians and transforming their work into something revolutionary. The sample became so embedded in 90s hip-hop that if you ask a producer from that era about sampling philosophy, this track comes up. It's not just a song, it's a masterclass in how hip-hop built itself on the shoulders of soul and funk giants. The Commodores didn't know when they recorded this that 30 years later, their horn section would be the foundation of a cultural movement. Number 9, Bonita Applebum by A Tribe Called Quest. This was the moment when Native Tongues Collective stopped being just a New York underground movement and became genuinely undeniable. Let's talk about what Ali Shaheed Muhammad and the production team did here. The beat is minimal, crisp snares, a simple loop, space for the vocals to breathe. Q-Tip's delivery is conversational, almost casual, but that's the genius. He's not trying to dominate the beat. He's having a conversation with it. Fifth Dog's production work on this was the kind of understated brilliance that separates real producers from beat makers. They took something simple and made it sophisticated. The song is about attraction, about noticing a woman, but it's done with such wit, such lyrical precision, that it elevated the entire aesthetic of what a hip-hop love song could be. Before Bonita Applebum, love songs in rap were either aggressive or overly sentimental. A Tribe Called Quest found a middle ground, playful, intelligent, respectful. This track broke into mainstream rotation at a time when Yo MTV Raps was still gatekeeping hip-hop exposure. Seeing the Bonita Applebum video on MTV, seeing those Adidas shell toes, that Native Tongues aesthetic, that whole vibe, it changed what hip-hop could look like and sound like on a national stage. The production was so clean that kids wanted to hear it over and over. The lyrics were clever enough that heads appreciated the technique. For a generation of MCs, this was proof that you didn't need to shout to be heard, didn't need violence to be respected. That's the influence of Bonita Applebum right there. Number 8, Dear Mama by Tupac Shakur, released in 1995.
In the kitchen trying to fix us a hot.
This was the moment when West Coast hip-hop showed it had something no one expected: emotional vulnerability combined with lyrical mastery. Let's be clear about what was happening culturally when this dropped. In 1995, hip-hop was divided, geographically and spiritually. East Coast had the lyrical dominance. Nas, Mo Better, Rakim. West Coast was seen as more production-heavy, more party-focused. And then Tupac dropped Dear Mama and changed the conversation. The beat, produced by Tony Pizarro, is built on a simple but emotionally devastating loop. It's not aggressive, it's reflective. And Tupac, who by reputation was this volatile, explosive presence, delivered one of the most genuine, heartfelt verses in hip-hop history. He's talking to his mother, he's acknowledging everything she sacrificed, He's apologizing for his own struggles, but he's also holding her accountable as a person, as a woman making choices, as a human. That nuance is what made this certified classic. This song, more than almost anything else in his catalog, showed that Tupac was a genuine artist capable of introspection and emotion. It also proved something crucial, that commercial success and artistic depth weren't mutually exclusive in hip-hop. Dear Mama hit #1. It stayed on charts for months, and it did that while being genuine, vulnerable, and absolutely uncompromising in its message. For an entire generation of West Coast heads, this song became the anthem for respecting the women in their lives, for acknowledging struggle, for understanding that being real meant being honest about pain. #7, Scenario by A Tribe Called Quest, featuring leaders of the new school. Now we're talking about 1991 and the absolute apex of Native Tongue's collective energy. This track featured Q-Tip and Five from Tribe, but the genius here was bringing in leaders of the new school. That's Busta Rhymes, Charlie Brown, and Dinko D. The beat is a Marley Marl production, while the Public Enemy remix scratches actually, and it's controlled chaos. There's space, there's structure, but there's also freedom. Listen to how each MC uses the same beat differently. Q-Tip is conversational, Fife is playful, Busta Rhymes is explosive, Charlie Brown is rhythmic, Dinko D brings old school flavor. That's not a lack of unity, that's sophisticated arranging. Every MC gets their moment to shine while contributing to a cohesive whole. What Scenario proved is that hip-hop could be democratic, that you didn't need one superstar to carry a track. When this video came out on MTV, suddenly you had 4 MCs who weren't famous yet, and they all became instantly recognizable. Busta's delivery alone, that style he developed, became iconic partly because of this one track. In terms of cultural impact, Scenario was a masterclass in how to introduce new talent, how to build consensus behind a group while letting individuals stand out. It also showed that Marley Marl's production style, which had defined early 80s and 90s Native Tongue sound, could still compete with newer, harder production. That's respect for production lineage right there. #6, Just Said No by Slick Rick, released in 1989 on his debut album, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. This track is where technique meets message, where virtuosity meets substance.
The way I have to end this story, he was only 7.
Slick Rick the Ruler was already known for his storytelling ability. His album opener, Children's Story, had established him as a genuine voice in hip-hop, but Just Said No showed that he could do more than just narrative. Here he was creating social commentary while maintaining technical excellence. The beat produced by Stinger is hard, New York production style. The bass is prominent, the snares crack, and Slick Rick floats over it with conversational flow, word tricks, and clever internal rhymes. Now the song is Anti-Drug, which in 1989 was a statement. This was during the height of the crack epidemic in American cities. Slick Rick's message that drugs were a losing proposition, that the game wasn't worth it, hit because he came from that world. He could speak authentically about temptation and refusal. What made Just Said No culturally important is that it proved socially conscious. Rap didn't have to be preachy. Slick Rick maintained his character, his wit, his presence, while delivering a genuine message. For heads, this was proof that you could care about your community and still be cool. You could acknowledge social problems and still maintain your credibility. That balance is harder than it sounds. Most rappers doing protest music come across either as self-righteous or as fake. Slick Rick found the middle ground with genuine knowledge from experience. Now we've reached the halfway point and we're building toward the pinnacle tracks. If you've connected with this deep dive into golden era hip-hop, this is where Hip Hop Legends Archives comes in. We're not just playing songs here, we're providing context, connecting these tracks to the cultural moment they emerged from, showing you why they mattered beyond just catchy beats or clever words. Every week on this channel, we're archiving the real history, the stories behind the music, the production choices, the economic conditions, the personal struggles, the street credibility battles. Subscribe now and turn on notifications because we're dropping deep historical analysis every week. And once you start thinking about hip-hop this way, you can't go back to just passively listening. These are the tracks that deserve respect, and they deserve an audience that understands their significance. #5, Everything is Everything by Lauryn Hill, released in 1998. As part of her album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, this track represents a watershed moment in hip-hop history. By the late 1990s, hip-hop had become commercially dominant, but Lauryn Hill asked a fundamental question: at what cost? The beat is a loop from Bob Marley's Iron Lion Zion, and it's immediately recognizable, immediately feels like a spiritual statement. But here's what's crucial. This was a female artist, operating at the absolute height of her commercial and critical power, using that platform to question materialism, industry exploitation, and the loss of artistic soul. Lauryn's delivery is conversational, almost like she's thinking out loud. The lyrics reference everything from materialism to relationship dynamics to her own position in the industry. She's not being preachy, she's being introspective. She's not pointing fingers, she's asking questions. That intellectual sophistication coming from a female artist in 1998 was groundbreaking. The music industry and hip-hop culture both had major gender dynamics at play. Lauryn Hill didn't ignore those dynamics. She used her platform to address them while maintaining absolute artistic credibility. Her flows are sophisticated, her production choices are refined, and her message is clear without being didactic. Everything is Everything became the unofficial anthem of late 90s consciousness, and it established Lauryn as one of the most important voices in hip-hop history. What made this certified classic was that it held up over time. It's not dated. The spiritual and existential questions she raises are timeless. Number 4. Check the Rhyme by A Tribe Called Quest, released in 1991. This track is the pure distillation of what native tongues represented at its peak. The production, handled by Ali Shaheed Muhammad, is a masterclass in minimalism and space. It's basically two elements, a pitch, vocal sample, and a simple drum pattern. That's it. But that simplicity forces Q-Tip and Phife to bring everything. Their lyrics have to be sharp, their deliveries have to be distinct, their chemistry has to carry the track, and it does. This song is a demonstration of technical skill, not for the sake of showing off, but for the sake of clarity and precision. Each MC gets 2 verses. Q-Tip goes first with a conversational flow, establishing the vibe. Phife comes in with a different rhythm, proving that the same beat can accommodate different approaches. Lyrically, they're talking about hip-hop, about MCs, about what it means to be skilled in this culture. But they're not being arrogant or dismissive. They're setting a standard. They're saying this is what excellence looks like for producers. Check the Rhyme became essential listening. It showed that you didn't need layered production, you didn't need multiple samples, you didn't need orchestration, you needed structure, you needed confidence in your core elements. This track influenced countless producers in the 90s and beyond. It's also a perfect snapshot of when A Tribe Called Quest was at their absolute creative peak, operating from a place of artistic confidence without mainstream desperation. Number 3, I Ain't Mad at Ya by Tupac Shakur, released in 1996.
Congratulations on the wedding. I hope you.
This song arrived at perhaps the most turbulent moment of Tupac's career. He had just been shot, released from prison, signed to Death Row Records, and was dealing with an industry that wanted him to be either a thug or irrelevant. I Ain't Mad at Ya offered a third option, him being himself. The production with those layered strings and that smooth overall aesthetic doesn't sound like Death Row Records' typical aggressive approach. It sounds like something Tupac wanted to create, which was an artistic statement in itself. The song is about letting go of ego, about understanding that people make choices, about not holding grudges, even when people move in different directions. This was coming from an artist who had legitimate beefs, legitimate conflicts in the industry. He was choosing grace here. The verses are introspective. The chorus is a hook that stays with you. The video, featuring Tupac at different ages, was heartbreaking in hindsight but also genuinely artistic in the moment. What made I Ain't Mad at Ya a certified classic is that it showed Tupac's full range, the vulnerability, the intelligence, the ability to communicate complex emotions without losing his street credibility. This song proved that West Coast hip-hop could do vulnerability without being soft. It could address interpersonal conflict without being violent. It could be commercially successful while being deeply artistic. For many listeners, this became the song that made them understand Tupac as something beyond a media figure or a persona, as a genuine artist with something to say. Number 2, Mind Playing Tricks on Me by the Ghetto Boys, released in 1991 and produced by James Prince and DJ Scratch.
I don't know who it is, so I'm watching my back.
This track redefined what a hip-hop song could address emotionally. The production is haunting, minor key strings, a simple but effective beat, and space for the vocals to sit in. The Ghetto Boys, featuring Willie D, Bushwick Bill, and Brad, are talking about paranoia, about street paranoia, about the psychological cost of hustling and living in dangerous environments. This isn't artistic paranoia, this is documentation. Each MC approaches the subject differently. Willie D is street-level, Bushwick Bill is chaotic and unpredictable. Brad brings smoothness to balance the intensity. The genius is that instead of competing or trying to overshadow each other, they're working together to create a full portrait of a psychological state. The hook is simple, repetitive, almost hypnotic. My mind is playing tricks on me. It's a statement that gets inside your head. For a generation of heads, this song became the definitive track about the psychological realities. What of street life? It wasn't glorifying it, it was documenting it. It wasn't offering solutions, it was describing the problem with artistic precision. Mind Playing Tricks on Me influenced hip-hop's approach to production and lyricism for years afterward. It proved that you could make commercially successful music while addressing genuinely dark subject matter if you did it with artistic integrity. This track is in permanent rotation in hip-hop's archive of essential listening. And number 1, Untitled How Does It Feel by D'Angelo, released in 2000 as part of his album Voodoo. This track arrived in a moment when hip-hop had become dominated by commercial interest and industry machinery. D'Angelo's approach was to strip everything back, to return to the core elements of soul, funk, and genuine human emotion. The production, by DJ Premier, Bob Power, and others, is characterized by what some critics called neo-soul, but what was really happening was a return to funk and soul principles while maintaining hip-hop sensibility. The song is conversational, almost stream of consciousness. D'Angelo is asking questions, expressing feelings, creating space space for the listener to sit in discomfort and process it. The musical arrangement is live, with actual instrumentation, which marked a departure from the sample-based production that had dominated the 90s. What made Untitled How Does It Feel the definitive capstone of our discussion is that it proved hip-hop could evolve without losing its soul. It showed that the culture could accommodate live instrumentation alongside sample production. It demonstrated that vulnerability could coexist with credibility. D'Angelo's delivery is almost sung, almost rapped, almost conversational. It exists in multiple genres simultaneously, which is exactly what the best hip-hop does. It refuses to be confined. This track also represents a moment when conscious consumption of music still meant something, when artistic merit trumped commercial positioning, when an album like Voodoo could dominate serious musicians' and critics' conversations despite not having clear commercial singles driving radio play. Here's what these 10 tracks have in common. They were made by people who understood that hip-hop was a culture, not just music. The production was intentional, the lyrics were considered, the context mattered, whether it was the Commodores in 1974, having no idea their horn stabs would define 90s hip-hop, or D'Angelo in 2000 deliberately returning to soul principles while maintaining hip-hop's forward momentum. These were artists operating with integrity. They were making art that reflected their reality while reaching towards something greater. The golden era that birthed these tracks wasn't just about the music, it was about community, about streets, about survival, about documentation. These 10 songs carry that weight. They're not just nostalgic, they're historically significant. They document a moment when hip-hop was still developing its own aesthetics and standards, before streaming algorithms decided what deserved attention, before TikTok clips replaced full song consumption, before the culture fragmented into so many subgenres that coherence seemed impossible. That's where Hip Hop Legends Archives focuses on preserving that moment, that era, that mindset. We're documenting the producers, the MCs, the DJs, the cultural context, the business decisions that shape these tracks. Every single one of these 10 songs has a backstory, a producer's inspiration, an MC's life circumstance, an industry moment that either supported or fought against its success. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss those deep dives. We go beyond the song into the culture. We fact check every claim because these legends deserve accuracy. We respect the context because context is everything. If you remember when these tracks came out, when you first heard them, when they meant something to your life, tell us in the comments. That's the conversation we're building here on Hip Hop Legends Archives. Which of these 10 tracks defined your golden era experience? Was there one that changed how you approached music or how you saw yourself? Did we get the history right, or do you have additional context to add? That's how we keep the culture alive, through conversation, through memory, through collective respect for what was created. Until next time, keep the heads up, stay conscious, and keep the golden era alive. Peace.